last year I'm in my 21st year. Can you imagine? I don't look old enough, do I? Come on. Somebody said I was aging well. I don't know about that. But I remember being in, there was a little church in Orford, and Stan was there and Les Dunn, and I was giving my testimony. It was before I worked for Warrington Youth for Christ, so Justin's signalling to me at the back. I need to lift my microphone up. Thank you, Justin. And yeah, I was giving my testimony, and it was one of the, I think, the first times I was ever giving my testimony. My story of being broken and how Jesus met this rough around the edges, early 20-year-old, and kind of started. I wasn't all put together by any means at that point, but he was starting to put me together, and I was just sharing my testimony about how I'd met Jesus. And Stan and Les were at the back, kind of punching the air and cheering us on. There was a few of us giving our testimonies that night, so thanks for that, Stan. But yeah, it's good to be here this morning representing Youth for Christ. And in true Youth for Christ fashion, I think I'm going to mix it up a little bit this morning. We normally sing a hymn at the end, but I'm going to talk a little bit about Youth for Christ, and I thought we could sing a hymn after that, and then I'll share what God's put on my heart, I think. Because what I want to do, if we've got a little bit of time at the end, and I'm keeping my eye on the clock because I know I've got half an hour, it might be good for us to pray for each other. So we'll just see how the Lord leads for that, but it'll be very discreet. It might just be praying for each other, the person next to us or the person behind us. So we'll just see what the Lord wants to do. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Birmingham at the 75th anniversary. Is that platinum? 75th anniversary? Is it a platinum jubilee, that one? Shares it with the Queen. She's coronation, 75 years this year. 75 years of British Youth for Christ. And I won't insult anyone by asking, was anyone there when it all started? But yeah, it was fascinating just listening to the history, really, of how it all began. There was a couple of the old names there. Eric Delve, I don't know whether he was the national evangelist. There was Clive Calver and his son Gavin Calver. Roy Crown, he was the director. I remember Roy when I started. And they were all sharing experiences and things that they'd done. And it was just a real buzz, in the atmosphere of what God had done over the years. But I didn't know a massive amount of the history. I knew it started with Billy Graham. I remember being told that after the Second World War, there was a fatherless generation. It's a little bit like that now, but it's a different kind of fatherless generation. These were men who weren't coming back from the war. Men are still around, but they're not necessarily around in the home in this day and generation. But back then, there was a real need for Jesus amongst the youth because there were a lot of young people who were fatherless at that time. So a guy called Tory Johnson and Billy Graham started what is now Youth for Christ. But I didn't know this, that as they were starting Youth for Christ in New York, reaching out, doing the big crusades to young people with the band and the evangelist. Billy Graham was the first paid evangelist. Little did I know that there were groups all around the world forming similar Youth for Christ networks and events, but they'd never met. So there was a group in Liverpool, there was a group in London, there were groups in New Zealand and Australia, all forming this Youth for Christ ministry. God was up to something. And what happened was, when Billy Graham came over in 1948, I think it was, when he came over to this country, they did crusades in London, they did crusades in Liverpool. They were starting to find out and hear about these other groups that had been set up, called Youth for Christ. So what happened was, God kind of superseded it all and joined, they went over, they heard about New Zealand and Australia a couple of years later. An international Youth for Christ was formed, and it was just exponentially sped up because these groups were already in operation. So God was up to something. So Youth for Christ Great Britain was set up then. It was only a year or two after they initially done the crusades in New York. Fast forwarding on from that, a group of leaders from Warrington went to Spring Harvest. and heard all about Youth for Christ. Someday, possibly Clive Calver at the time, did a presentation on Youth for Christ, its history, what they wanted to achieve. They wanted to see Jesus in schools. They wanted to see Jesus in the local community. They wanted to see Jesus amongst the young people of our nation. And they were inspired by that. They came back to Warrington, had a few meetings, and decided to form Warrington Youth for Christ. So they got some trustees together, and it was voluntary-led for a couple of years, but Warrington Youth for Christ is 35 years old, and I can imagine some of you were there when it all began, when it started, and that's not offending anyone, because I could have been there as well. But they started off, group of volunteers, organising bands, paying local bands, Christian bands, to go into schools for just 1 week of a mission, and then with an end of week evangelistic talk and response. And then Nigel Lane, many of you remember Nigel, was the first paid director in Warrington, and then he built a team around him. Steve Bultow, we took over from him, and I was one of Steve's little minions for a time, and then when this opportunity came up, I found myself leading the organisation. I never wanted to be a leader. I'm always, some people are reluctant leaders. It wasn't for me, but I just felt at the time I just needed to stand in the gap, and I did. And God's been so faithful over the years. We see ourselves very much as a missional arm of the church. We were set up by the church in Warrington, and the church is the infantry, I like to see, and parachurch organisations are like those. We're still part of the wider army, but we are the paras, or we are the Marines. Not that we're any harder than anyone else or any more skillful than anyone else, but we have a specific, we laser in on a specific task, and that is youth. So we come alongside local churches across Warrington, and that's what we do. We get alongside churches and try and equip them, train them, and work with them to reach the young people of our communities. And that's what I think Kim does really well here. And we try and model that in every one of our areas. And we're in virtually all the high schools across Warrington. I think there are only 3, possibly 4 high schools out of 13 that we're not currently in, but we are working on that. And it's been quite a challenging, last couple of years, hasn't it, with restrictions and everything. You've found yourselves with doors closed and not able to use buildings. So we've had to diversify, and we've had to change the way we worked over the past 2 years of COVID. And we did that. We couldn't get into schools at first. Why? Because schools were shut, so we couldn't get in. So we asked schools, what are the needs? And there were a lot of young people suffering with mental health problems. You can imagine, I think it all had an effect on our mental health, what was going on, not being able to get out, not being able to see family and visit, and young people's mental health was affected. And certainly the young people who were already quite vulnerable, we saw a massive, decline in their mental health. So schools were saying, look, we just need your help. We need you to get alongside these kids, but obviously we're not open. You can come in and see some of the more vulnerable kids, the key workers, children, some of those, but there are many at home, and home's not necessarily the safest place either, or the place that they necessarily want to be because of issues. So we set up online mentoring. We have done mentoring in the past, but all the teams started to do this online mentoring where we log on to Zoom and we have sessions with young people. The schools would refer these young people to us, and we'd get alongside them that way. That kind of moved on when schools started opening again. We generally go into classes and help out with our re-lessons and things like that, but even classrooms were restricted. We couldn't be at the front, we couldn't be alongside. The teachers had a big tape around the desk where no one can enter. It was like everything was locked down, wasn't it, even once things had opened in that sense. So we couldn't even get into classrooms. But when we got into our schools, they said, can you continue to get alongside our young people? Can you continue to mentor them? So we carried on doing that. And so, we because we'd gone online and we knew young people were spending more time online, we started to do quite a bit of evangelism online as well. So through social media, we started to record videos and short clips on what it is to be a Christian, some short courses like a short alpha and other things that we used. We started to share our faith online, and we were reaching quite a few hundred young people every week doing that, which was amazing. You can look at all the statistics behind the scenes on certain websites that you use and social media that you use. So it was telling us that we were connecting with so many hundred young people each week. So that was really effective. Then we started, as things opened up even more, we started to get back into our communities. We weren't able to use buildings at that point, so we took the building outside, and we've done detached work for many years. In fact, Justin's one of our longest serving. I think he started off volunteers. He started off doing detached work in this area, I think with Steve Bultawe, probably well over 20 years ago. He'll tell me after how many that probably was. But we took the resources out. So we started to set up some of the youth clubs and drop-ins out on the streets. We set up gazebos, got the young people under the gazebo with, outside. You're not as limited. So we started to connect that way. And so, we've just carried on the work. We've never closed down. None of our staff have had to be furloughed, maybe 1 or 2 days initially, but we were in, all the team were in, which is testimony to God's goodness. Do you know what I mean? That we've got that relationship with our schools, that we can still carry on working with them and offering, Jesus to the young people of our town. Some new opportunities coming up. We have a town centre worker that we're recruiting for. We've not able to find anyone as of yet. So if you do know someone who's got a passion for young people, got a bit of experience in youth work, come and see me afterwards, because there's a new youth zone being built, multi-million-pound youth zone with climbing wall and gym and sports hall. It's even got a 3G pitch on the roof, can you believe? An AstroTurf pitch on the roof. So when you're coming in on the train into Warrington, you'll see all these kids kicking a ball about. It's all caged off, so the balls don't go flying into the bus station. But they've given us access to take a Warrington Youth for Christ worker into that youth zone. There'll be hundreds, thousands probably over the course of the next 12 months in there. So it's a great opportunity, again, just to get alongside our young people, and they'll be, spread out all across Warrington. But we've actually asked if we can do some chaplaincy in there, because, they're providing all the other areas of a young person's health and well-being, the social, emotional, spirit, physical. But what about the spiritual? We said that to them. We can provide the spiritual, so we can put a chaplain in here. And a stone's throw away from Warrington Youth Zone is the UTC school. I don't know if anyone's aware that there's a new school in Warrington from year 10 and above. We've never worked in that school before, apart from a few weeks ago when we did a day of religion and tolerance lessons. And so we were talking about our faith and what it means, to be Christians in this day and generation with everything that's going on around us. And it was amazing, and they've invited us in. So that worker will also go to UTC school, which is a stone's throw away from the youth zone, as well as doing Detached in the town centre, and some linking it up with some events in the town centre as well that are more evangelistic. We're going to get to see a worker in the town centre, something we've never had before. We've had workers in local communities, but not in that hub, in that place where young people bus in and, get up to all kinds, really. So we're really excited and looking forward to that. For the first time, we've got an open door into Sankey High School. Someone off our team just recently moved on. They were in Penketh High. So we've got another vacancy there. Pray for us for that. Someone will not only work in Sankey, they'll work in Penketh as well in that area and reach out to the surrounding areas. So we're just working with a couple of churches on funding at the moment for that job. So do pray for that. And Stockton Heath as well. So we're working with a church over in Stockton Heath. In fact, Stockton Heath Christian Fellowship is a church that we're in talks with at the moment to see how we can support them. Again, the missional arm of the church, Youth for Christ, coming alongside the church, working with the church to see that community reach for Jesus as well. And, our worker in the high school, Bridgewater, our worker in that local community, partnering with a local church on the ground as well, similar to what Kim does here and obviously some of the other churches around, all really to see young people being brought from a place of no faith through to commitment, right through to discipleship. And that really can only happen in the local church. They need grandmothers and grandfathers and mothers and fathers in God. You know, a lot of these kids do. They need those role models around them, people supporting them, people cheering them on and praying for them. So that's why it's key, really, that we work with people such as yourself. So I've taken half my time. I thought we'd quickly sing the last hymn, and then I'll share some thoughts, and we might get to pray for each other.